Context, context, context. If there is one thing my journalism is about, this new show, Mehdi Unfiltered, is about, and our new company, Zeteo, is all about, it's providing context. Because context matters. It allows us to fully understand an issue, the meaning, the background, the history. It allows us to connect the dots and truly make sense of what we're being told. And yet we just had a major media fail, a major absence of context, when Iran unleashed a barrage of more than 300 drones and missiles at Israel, which thankfully didn't kill any civilians and didn't do much damage to Israel, but has raised concerns about the start of a new and dangerous war in the region. An attack which was followed last week by an apparent Israeli strike on a military airbase near the city of Isfahan in central Iran. Now, Iran's attack on Israel was presented by many media outlets as Iran being Iran, the rogue nation, the anti-Semitic, anti-American terror state, the irrational, unhinged country that is desperate to wipe little Israel off the map. No context necessary, no history needed. And I'm not even talking ancient history, which isn't actually that ancient. You know, the fact that the United States and the UK helped topple democratically elected Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in a coup back in 1953, and then replaced him with a brutal dictator, the Shah, which then paved the way for the Ayatollah's revolution in 1979. I'm not referring here even to the US and UK support for Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons against Iran in the 1980s, or during Ronald Reagan's presidency, the shooting down of Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 civilians on board. You know, the kind of things that might make any country a little wary, a little angry, a little paranoid and defensive. But no, I'm talking about much more recent context, much more recent history. The last decade and a half of assassinations, for example, almost certainly by Israel, of Iranian nuclear scientists, civilians murdered inside of Iran. Or just consider the past 6 months alone. In December, as CNBC reported, Israeli-linked hackers took out nearly 70% of Iran's gas stations, causing chaos in that country. Then, in February, the New York Times reported that Israel carried out covert attacks on 2 major natural gas pipelines inside Iran, disrupting the flow of heat and cooking gas to provinces with millions of people. It went on to describe those attacks as having marked an escalation in the covert war and appeared to open a new frontier. But where was this context from February when Iran launched its attack or counterattack on Israel last week? And then, of course, there was the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate building in Syria on April the 1st, just 2 weeks before Iran sent drones and missiles to Israel. In fact, Israel's attack killed 7 Iranian officers, 3 of them top generals, a clear violation of international law, of the Vienna Convention, which Israel is party to, and which says diplomatic facilities are inviolable. That attack was mentioned by some media outlets almost in passing, as if it wasn't anything other than the main reason cited by Iran for its retaliatory attack on Israel. Look, to be clear, the members of the Iranian government are, of course, no choir boys. They're not innocent of crimes against their own people, especially in terms of brutal repression and persecution of dissidents, in particular women and minorities. And as the Israelis point out, Iran funds and arms proxy groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, which do kill Israeli civilians. No one is defending the Iranian government here. But to pretend that Iran is behaving irrationally or abnormally vis-à-vis Israel is just so disingenuous and irresponsible. Iran did last week what pretty much any country in that situation would do. Well, given they didn't kill any Israeli civilians and ended up hitting an Israeli military base, they did less than what Israel has been doing in Gaza with its attacks on civilian targets and its killing of nearly 14,000 children. Oh, and by the way, look what happened when Sky News host Kay Burley cornered British Foreign Secretary David Cameron on this very issue.
What would Britain do if a hostile nation flattened one of our consulates?
Well, we would take the very strong action.
And Iran would say that that's what they did?
Well, what they did, as I said, was a massive attack.
So they were right to respond, but they overreacted, is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the attack they carried out was on a very large scale, much bigger than people accepted.
They have a right to respond?
Well, countries have a right to respond when they feel they've suffered an aggression. Of course they do. But look at the scale of that response.
That's the British Conservative Foreign Minister saying the quiet part out loud. Meanwhile, over here in Washington, D.C., we have the ultra-conservative, ultra-hawkish, super pro-Israel GOP going to bat for Israel and lying about Iran. Republican Congressman Brian Mast, the guy who called Palestinian kids Nazis and wore an Israeli military uniform to Congress, called it an unprovoked attack on Twitter. So did GOP House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who said the House of Representatives stands strongly with Israel and there must be consequences for this unprovoked attack. Yes, unprovoked by Iran. Forget about the attack on their consulate, or the bombing of their gas pipelines, or the cyber attacks on their gas stations. No, it was all unprovoked. And now innocent Israel needs to defend itself and teach Iran, the bully, a lesson. And we, America, need to join in. Look, we expect elected Republicans to lie shamelessly, to gaslight openly. That's who they are these days. But our media, in particular our so-called liberal media, has to be better than that. Context has to be key, especially in our media coverage of the Middle East. Context matters. Because if you don't have context, you find yourself being lied to, being duped and deceived, and then sleepwalking into World War III.